Berserk is one of the most beloved manga ever, but can you really say the same about its games? Maybe they're even worse than a specific anime version that should not be talked about. They can't be that bad, right? So let's take a look at them. There is a localized version of the game, but I decided to go for the fan translation anyway since older anime games mostly got the short end of the stick and not too much effort was put into translating them faithfully. In the English dub it's also said to be horrendous, which can be funny, but sometimes I need to save my poor precious ears and listen to the original instead. It also came out 3 years before the first official English version of the manga, so there were probably a bunch of people who got this for their Dreamcast without knowing what Berserk actually is. Or they were reading the fan subs for the manga already online and were looking forward to buying it, like a true old school otaku. Before I talk about the bad, how about we praise it first? I really like how it catches the atmosphere of the manga. It just fits it well and everything is so depressing, which makes it feel like a playable little arc that wouldn't really be out of place in the manga. You arrive at a city, people sitting around, looking all sad and like their life got no purpose. How nice. The color of the sky already painting a picture of misery for what is about to happen to the poor town. And the monsters look fairly cool with all the body horror going on. It just has that Berserk vibe to it. Well, that's all the nice things I can really say. It also helps that the story was actually written by Kentaro Miura himself, rest in peace. And the OST is a banger. It has forces too, as in the number, not the actual forces. Forces is probably my favorite song in the Berserk franchise and one of the best battle themes kinda ever. Forces 2 also just slaps. The whole OST is made by Susumu Hirasawa, who already scored the original anime and other Berserk related things. If you ever watch something that he worked on like Paprika, you just know how unique his music is. The game takes place after the eclipse, so Guts, Casca and Puck are wandering around, trying to find a way to Elfheim to find a cure for Casca since she's in her broken state after all that happened. On the way they meet Rita, a street performer, and her friend Jobs. He's called like that because he jobs. The town and surrounding areas have a bad case of the Mandragorans though. You know those little plants that if you pull them out of the ground they scream and you will most likely die from how loud they are? You have seen them in movies or games before, probably. Here some people are fused with them and are seen as monsters, getting bullied or even killed by other humans, which kinda makes sense since they can transform and become super duper aggressive. But are they really evil actually? More about that later. After taking one down, the ruler of this town, who is totally not an evil person with hair like that, wants you to get the core of those evil things from a village that is full of them and baits you by telling you the cure he can make out of it can maybe even cure Casca. Is it bait? Is he telling the truth? Maybe, maybe not. A hack and slash is maybe the best genre for a Berserk game, and I have nothing against those, but this one is just way too simple even in comparison with others. You have 2 attacks and that's it pretty much, if we ignore the items you can use. There is no real combos except for spamming your attacks. In other games you could combine them and throw people up, juggle them in the air, things like that. Here you got none of that, so it's just you smashing those buttons over and over. But I don't mind simpleness. Sometimes being simple is the best. The biggest problem actually is it puts you into little hallways way too often and you keep hitting the walls with your big sword. Now you can say, hey, the game allows you to use your fists so you can punch the enemies so you won't clang and clonk and bonk against walls, but do you really want that? Do you really want to play a Berserk game and not use the Dragon Slayer? No, right? You want to swing it around and show you are the biggest boy that has ever lived with such a big thing in your hands. There's also throwing knives you can use, little bombs, or also the arm cannon, which is totally overpowered. You have limited uses of them, but can find more in the stages sometimes or get them refilled after beating one. And last but not least, the Berserk mode. Whenever you hit enemies, you will fill it up with the blood of them, and eventually when it's filled up, your screen turns red and you can spam your buttons as if you're playing a fighting game as a total beginner, since here you don't lose any health and are extra fast with your attacks. When you do get to swing the Dragon Slayer around in wider areas, it does get pretty fun, but you kinda wish its combat system had a bit more to offer. It manages to pull you in though because you want to see what happens, since the story, despite being fairly simple and easy to see through, is taking you to many different places like a forest, the inside of a tree, an underground hideout and a village where the monsters live, but you find out they're actually not evil at all as long as you don't show them any evil intent, which your comrades do so they all get slaughtered. Serves them right. Maybe humans were the true monsters all along, a tale as old as time itself. Before the final boss, who isn't the final boss, you have to escape from these vines, and I will ask you a question. Does his jump animation look like the kind of jump animation that makes you think this controls better than Mario? You don't need to answer it, we already know it anyways. One mistake and you die, which luckily isn't too bad since you have unlimited saves and start right here again, but it's still just frustrating, even if it only took me a few minutes to get past it, mostly because I totally have a big brain and could remember which path to take, after dying and dying and dying because I didn't know what was coming up next. If I want to play a jump and run like this, I go back and play some Crash Bandicoot games. But I don't want to jump like this in a Berserk game. I know that sometimes developers really want to give you fun and epic set pieces, but this is neither. The one time they try to give you something else to do except for slashing your way through enemies is this. They could have just made you fight against a bunch of vines or something, and even that would have been better. The game was a bit ahead of its time with its use of quicktime events. I was kinda surprised when they showed up. Sometimes you get one, and if you fail it, you either die or take a different path that will maybe take you longer than as if you actually got the QTE in time. So Guts used them before Leon S. Kennedy made them cool to use. Also, the actual final boss has a super sick design, but my arm cannon kinda, almost one-shotted him. I played it on normal, and while the game was fairly challenging at points, it felt like I did make a mistake by doing this fight on that difficulty, since I wanted to see more of him. The game is extremely mean though, because for just a moment it makes you think Casca was fixed, just so she can become a baby again like 5 seconds after. Imagine playing this back then as a manga reader and thinking, wow, maybe this means she will be healed soon in the manga too, since the man himself wrote this. Just for it to take like 17 more years or so. It's certainly worth a look for Berserk fans who want to feel like they're playing an actual little manga arc, so it does its job fairly well to give you a Berserk experience, but I wish the combat system would have been a bit more complex and that the walls wouldn't just hold the game back. The game would at least be 10% more fun if you don't keep bonking the Dragon Slayer against walls. It's also pretty damn short. It took me around 3 hours and it has a surprisingly large amount of longer cutscenes, so the actual gameplay part is more like 2 hours. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but you kinda wish it would be a little longer. If you are an enjoyer of Drakengard 1, not for its story, but for its gameplay, here's a game I could easily recommend to you, because it's basically Drakengard for the PlayStation 2, but with Berserk instead. You mindlessly slash your way through hordes of enemies that never stop. You don't get to breathe except for when you're at a save point. Endless enemies just spawning and trying to get you, which happened in the first game too, but here they really don't stop spawning except at certain points. You can just stand here and fight enemies as long as you want, but why would you want to do that? It's like working retail around Christmas time, they keep on coming. After a while you just run past everything unless the game traps you in an area that first makes you defeat all enemies before you can continue. It's made by the same studio as the first game, but they learned since then, luckily. Sadly, they also unlearned a few things. The first game felt more linear in its path. You got a stage and you go from here to there, but sometimes there's enemies you have to kill. The scope of it felt more tight than here, where the game throws you into these somewhat big maps and there's no change at all really. You just walk and slash while the environment stays the same till you get to the next stage. The worst thing about it is that there's fluff built into these stages that isn't needed. I went a different path than the main path to maybe find something nice, but I only got a sprue gun that gives you extra XP, but I continued down this path and there's nothing down here. Why does this exist except for wasting my time? It made me think, why should I ever just not get to the blinking point of the map if you punish me for actually going to explore? At least they fixed the issue of clonking your sword against the walls, because even if you do hit a wall, it doesn't matter. It's less realistic, but sometimes fun is more important than realism. Aside from that, the game doesn't use really narrow paths anyways, so you wouldn't really bonk so much to begin with. But the big maps just suck and made me almost go insane. You will see why later. The newest thing is the combat system though, and if you just look at the gameplay, you probably think, doesn't look too different, still having two buttons for your attacks and having a dashy dash. But it has a completely different feel to it, because it makes you feel as if you're controlling the sword instead of Guts himself. When you attack, you kinda choose which way the sword hits next, instead of making Guts move even though he obviously moves too. Take a little look at this animation if you swing and then not do anything afterwards. The sword gets held up in this position, and if you don't do anything, then you're allowed to move normally again. But if you decide you want to keep attacking, it then moves into the direction you picked. Explaining it is harder than getting used to it. It also lets you counter and reverse the enemy attacks, because if you guard at the right moment, you go boom on them instead. You do not really need this against normal enemies, but it shows its shininess in the actual boss battles and makes you think, man, this is really fun. Just look at this battle against Zod, the animations and little built-in cutscenes. Normally I don't want to hear the word cinematic when it comes to gameplay, but it does make the game feel more cinematic without feeling worse because of it during these battles. The game also introduces an EXP system where defeated enemies give you experience to level stuff up with, like taking less damage, making Puck's healing stronger, giving you a longer combo, swinging your sword faster, things like that. Also the items this time run on a cooldown based system instead of carrying a limited amount of them, and yes, the arm cannon this time is also busted. You also get skills for your friends like Shirka giving you a defensive buff or Serpico being able to make time stop. If you hit an enemy, they actually regain the ability to move again, so it's kinda a bit useless unless you maybe level it up. I didn't bother with any of these skills though except for leveling up Puck's healing. Berserker mode also is back and it's the same as in the first game, except for you being able to decide when to activate it. But my favorite new addition to the combat system is that sometimes your brand of sacrifice flashes up, so you can press the triangle button for Guts to grab an enemy and really just mess them up badly. Like if you do this on the trolls, you just do this and it just looks so cool. Maybe it's because I like my life being monotone, but I could just sit here all day and do this while watching a video or stream on the other monitor or listening to some nice My Chemical Romance, except for chapter 4, that almost broke me. You have to ask some kids where Shirka lives and they hide, and on the map there's a blinking dot, so my dumb brain thought, hey, I gotta go there to find the kids. Nope. They were in the left side of the map that I couldn't see since I had to uncover the map first to see the blinking dot where they were. So I had to travel all the way back. Even worse when I first went around the right side to get back. And then I had to get back there anyway since the kids run around, so you have to find them multiple times. At least I had the map uncovered so their position was shown to me, but god, I hated every single second of this. What did I do to deserve this? If I had any self-respect, I would have quit here, but no. I had to keep going because, well, gotta see if it gets better, right? Just like life. Can't get worse, right? 1. After finding a village, you're actually allowed to walk around the village and even get 1000 XP for talking to random villagers, but aside from that there's nothing to do. And I hate the camera here. It's way too close to Guts, and I think in a town your character should be smaller and have the camera give you a nice view of the town instead, like most JRPGs did it back in the day. But that's just my personal preference. What really sucks about the stage is that you have to fight trolls, and then do it over here, and then repeat it 5 more times to defend some villagers, and just get stuck in these tiny areas for like 3 minutes each before you get to fight more trolls. Before it ends in a shit show of a boss battle with a fake out, since you think you have to fight the ogre, but he goes down easily and you have to fight a dumb kelpie instead. And then the ogre again because it didn't die. But where did it go in the time I was fighting the kelpie? And to top it all off, Shirka summons a whole flood that destroys the village to sweep away all the enemies, but it makes the fight just harder for Guts instead. She really did need to do this. Also, why summon a flood when there's a kelpie? Kelpies get stronger with the water. She even says that earlier when it rains, she's like, oh no, the kelpie is getting stronger because there's water raining down on it. But why would you summon a flood? I mean, it gets flooded away by it, but you know, yeah, actually she's right. That wasn't even the worst the game has to offer. I thought I was getting pranked later in the Troll's Nest level, where you have to beat a whole bunch of them in a puddle to save Casca. Then you have to do it again while they flee, and you have to hold the trolls back. And then do it again for no reason at all. 3 times the same thing over and over, spamming you with enemies while you beg God to take you already home. Why? Were those extra 20 minutes of playtime really worth it to make your game worse and to lower my sanity? Followed by the same boss battle you already fought 3 times by now because some dumb kid called Charles, never trust a person called Charles, follows you around because you destroyed his dream world, so he had to snap back to reality, and now he's mad and makes you fight your worst nightmares and your guild and all that. And then you gotta fight Slan, where you just hit the wings over and over to open them up, so you can actually hurt her in the first phase. And then you have to do the same in the second phase too. That's why I said no, and close the game. Like, you see me hitting her wings, right? You think, oh, you're an idiot, you don't have to do that. There's probably a way to do this better. No, I googled, I saw a guide, it said hit the wings over and over. I looked at a long play, hit the wings over and over. There was no other way to open the wings except for smashing them for 5 minutes straight. The game really just tries its hardest to make you quit. Revoke my gamer license if you want to, but I think I would have went insane if I had to keep playing this boss battle. Even the eye candy can't help it. She may be made out of guts, but I mean, every woman is, right? There's guts inside of you right now. No, not guts himself. It could have been something great, since especially cutscenes look amazing for its time and the combat feels so fitting with how heavy it is, but sadly this time they really dig their own grave by making the levels too big for their own good. If you cut them down by half, it would have been shorter but more dense, and sometimes that's exactly what you want, especially since the combat system can't carry this for such a long amount of time. Mostly because it feels you only need to use it fully for the bosses, and all the enemies can just be cut down by spamming without using the counter mechanic too much. The Dreamcast game felt a bit too short, this one felt too long for what it is. Sadly they couldn't hit that sweet spot in between, because it would have been really special if they did. Combine the more linear levels with the combat system here and boom, that would have been the best out of both worlds. It's hard for me to actually recommend this game to people, even if I would say I still somehow had my fun with it, but I'm a masochist for bad games, so maybe that's why. At the very least, I would tell you to watch its cutscenes online because they are really amazing. Some may say they even look better than the one certain anime I may have to talk about later again. And it's the truth. I wonder how expensive it would be to animate the whole Berserk saga with this kind of CGI, because I wouldn't mind watching this at all. The first thing I have to say is sorry for your voice, but I kinda made the mistake of not upping up the bitrate in my recording settings for this kind of game, so it will look fairly unsharp at times. I apologize for that, and I only noticed it when I was watching my footage when editing the video. Not quite sure if my PC could handle it though, but I should have at least tried. This is the Berserk game most people have played, if they played one, I guess. But does that mean it's the best one? What if it turns out to be the worst one? Or maybe it's right there in the middle of all three, since this is also the last game, maybe forever. The game uses scenes from the movies to tell the story, and I was surprised at how much they actually show through them. Like, sometimes you have to sit down and have to watch a whole 5 minutes of the actual movie, which isn't a bad thing, but I expected it to be told through in-game cutscenes. It actually changes though when they run out of movie scenes to use, since they didn't tell the whole story. No worries, they actually look pretty good, and some people would even prefer it if the whole game was done in the game's engine, most likely. The movies actually looked okay. They kind of fell off with how they made the characters look to me, but you know, better than what followed. Back in the day, the movies got fairly hated on for their mix of 2D and CGI, but people couldn't have known that it could get way worse. The 2016 anime really is just something that should have never existed. Normally I let things exist in peace regardless of how bad they are, but that one was an actual insult to the manga, its creator, to the people who watched it, even to the people who had to work on it, to life and the universe itself, making a mockery of the whole art form. People say everything is art, but that excludes Berserk 2016. Nobody, not even your worst enemies, deserve to get their favorite manga turned into something like that. The only thing that scares me even more than bad CGI in anime are the companies behind them and blocking videos that contain 5 seconds of their anime inside of it, which instantly makes it blocked in 90% of countries, so I won't be able to show too much of them because I'm a scaredy cat and I'm gonna flip them anyway, so hopefully, you know, it doesn't look bad if you flip anime cutscenes, but maybe it does. I mean, that's how reaction channels do it, right? I would even recommend those movies if you really want to watch Berserk in an animated way, but only if you really have and want to. I have to say, I'm a noob when it comes to these kind of games really. The only other one I have recently played was Hyrule Warriors, and that was also quite a few years ago, so I do not know how it stacks up in comparison to the newer titles or even some of the older ones, but it felt like a normal musou game to me. You know what that means. You slash your way through tons and tons and tons of enemies, getting all dirty with blood and just trying to make your opponent's army flee from yours. There's sometimes a few objectives on the map like rescue your friend, so you gotta go to him and touch him like bros do so he's safe with a gentle kiss on his cheeks. Or making sure to take out all the generals so your army can advance with the battering ram. Little things like that. Mostly they're just there to make you go from point A to point B to kill more enemies. What a surprise. And that's all I can kinda say about the actual gameplay. Smash those buttons and let out all your stress inside of the game. Or buy a punching bag and do it in real life, even though I read that you can easily break your hand if you punch a punching bag the wrong way. Maybe that was a lie though. You never know what you can actually trust on the internet after all. You can even ride on horses. Makes traversal a lot easier, but I do not like to fight on it. I don't even like horses, but I just don't want it to get hurt. And well, it really isn't much fun to use. That's actually the biggest reason behind it. One thing I do love though is that depending on where you are in the story, the main screen actually changes. I love it when games do that. Berserk is perfect for a musou game on paper because there's big armies and battles which fit the theme of one. What didn't quite fit for me was that the characters are quite similar to each other. Guts is the slow and big one, who can hit many enemies with his Dragon Slayer but needs some time to wind up his attacks, unless you use his Berserker armor. Then you wish you could somehow make him move slower because look at this, he's jumping all over the place and even just running normally feels a bit too fast. Still fun as hell to play as though. Casca is the fast and agile one who jumps around the battlefield with her sword and can use hand-to-hand combat too, but Judo is kinda the same in that regard with his double daggers, but without jumping around the place so much. Griffith has a rapier that is fast and pierces your enemies, but Serpico is basically the same as him, just that he has some wind powers on top of it. Chirkia is the only character that is totally unique and doesn't feel like any of the other characters, and that's the biggest weakness of the game. If we take Hyrule Warriors, there's so much variety in the characters where most feel not similar at all, and even if they do, there's a whole 29 of them. And then there's also different weapon styles. Here, there's only 8. They couldn't even hit double digits. 8 characters in a musou game is just not enough, especially when they don't even make you feel like they're very different from each other. This is made worse by you having mostly to play as Guts since the earlier party members are either dead, became a baby or evil, and you only got him till you get Shirka and Serpico, and even then the game won't let you freely choose between them anyways. Halfway through I just downloaded a save game, I hope that's okay for you and you won't immediately discard my opinion because of it, to see if the game changes it up, but it just doesn't. There's no pick that feels out of the left field that makes you think, wow, they picked this dude, except maybe Wild, and then it just makes you think they let you play as him, but not as Skull Knight? What the hell? You can't even play as Isidro or Finesse. Today I learned she's taller than me, so today I learned something. So while in Hyrule Warriors I also eventually got a bit worn out, here it just sets in way earlier because of that. It doesn't mix things up enough to make you think, damn, this is great and I want to keep going. It's neat to have the story in a full playable way that basically includes anything you could ask for, but for someone like me who already knows what happens, it's a bit lame, if I may say so. If I never read it before, I would be more invested to see what happens next and keep going, but I just started to skip through the cutscenes so I can cut down more enemies instead and only let the cutscenes play at those really big moments. I really wish they would have just made up their own story. In a way, that's what musou games are about for me. A cool spin-off with lots of what-if scenarios and fan service, not having to be binded down to an already existing storyline so I can be anyone I want to be instead of being tied down to the specific character for specific scenes unless you go into free play. In free play, you can play as Casca during the eclipse, but it doesn't really change anything about it. Imagine if the story just turned the tables around and you actually had to save Guts from Griffith. Those kind of mix-ups. This is fairly subjective though. Maybe you would love to play through the original story in its intended way without any changes. Also, I kinda hated how you couldn't use the extra outfits in the story mode because of that, unless you already played through a level before or just go into free play, but that just feels a bit lame. I really wanted to use Shirka's golem outfit in the actual story, or her pirate outfit, even though the game only allows you to play a certain like 2 chapters in the story anyways. At least the game has 2 bath scenes, one for each kind of fan. Now that's what I call equality. So in the end, we never really got a Berserk game that makes you think, god damn, this is the perfect Berserk game. Let's face it though, that's the case for 90% of anime. Some get lucky like Dr. Slump and its PlayStation 1 game, others get decent to good games and then you get a whole bunch of trash. Luckily Berserk was safe from any total garbage, but there's just a lot of lost potential here. And there's a reason why most people play these Souls games with a guts kind of build, because those games really manage to make you think you kinda are playing a Berserk game. And that's also the thing, without Berserk, the Souls franchise could have been pretty damn different. Maybe it wouldn't even exist at all. So we all gotta thank it for existing because it's also a really fun read, even if it depresses you and makes you feel sad, bad and mad at the same time. So if you never read it before, then what's the hold up? I would also have to ask you why you're watching a video on games about a franchise you never read. It's something I would never do, but I guess we are all different in the end after all. And that's a good thing, because you would never want to be like me, hopefully. Strive to become your own person, just like Guts did. Even if you're struggling, there's always people to back you up, and if there isn't one yet, then there will be one in the future. I wanted to end the video by saying that maybe Berserk will never have an ending unlike this video, but I think the people currently working on it will finish it. Do not let Miura's life work go to waste and bring it to an end. Otherwise it would just feel like a broken promise, being given that responsibility and then just backing out of it. Or maybe it will have an ending that makes people think it should have never ended to begin with because they hate the ending that much. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and will have a good day, a good night or whatever fits your time zone, and maybe you will actually play some of these games too. If you don't know what to do with your time and are okay by wasting it by playing 3 fairly monotone games and turning into masochists because of them. Bye bye.